Hey, I'm Don Was. I'm a musician, a record producer, and the president of Blue Note Records, the world's most venerable jazz label. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person with you today. I was looking forward to meeting up with everybody, and I hope to see y'all soon. I was looking forward to chatting about sound, chatting about stuff, and really chatting about the ELS Studio 3D, which I think is just an incredible way to listen to music. I went to meet with the folks at Panasonic, and in particular to hear their ELS sound system for the car. Mark Zamba, who I think is a genius, took me out in the parking lot and sat me down in one of the Acuras, and he put on Nick of Time. He played a song called Too Soon to Tell that I happened to be playing piano on. And I heard the surround thing, and it was like being back in the studio. I felt that it took 15 years, but I felt we really achieved our sonic goal at that moment. Our goal when we made that record was to make it sound like you were driving in a car and that Bonnie was sitting in the passenger seat next to you and that she was singing into your ear. It was supposed to be that intimate. You were to have a personal conversation with her. What I heard sounded like exactly what I heard when I was sitting there playing the piano. And I could picture where everybody was sitting. I could smell the studio even. You know, it just sounded like the room that we were trying to capture. And it was a kind of transcendental experience for me. I remember being, I remember sitting in the car and tearing up a little bit. A few years after that, I remember coming back to my office at Capitol Tower, that round building in Hollywood. And I saw Mark Zamba again. He was out in the parking lot with a new car, and he wanted me to get in again. He wanted to play me something. It was a Blue Note track called Moanin' by Art Blakey, which is really a classic track. So I sat in the passenger seat, and I was blown away because they captured the sound of Rudy Van Gelder's studio, which is where it was recorded. And I've been in that room. I know what it sounds like, and you can hear that on the records, but in that car, I could experience the entire room, and I thought, "Wow, this has been our goal. How did you do this, man? This sounds like you're right there in the room with the musicians, listening to Art Blakey and his band record the song." Elliot Scheiner is just an incredible genius. One of the nice things about working in studios in Los Angeles is that there'd be many rooms, and you get to run into other people making records in those other rooms. So over the last 3-4 decades, I've run into Elliot a lot. Not only is he a terrific guy, but absolutely a sonic genius, and has an incredible history in music, going back to Van Morrison and Moondance and the Guess Who, records like that in the 60s, the Eagles and Steely Dan, right up to the present day. You know, he still makes beautiful sounding records. So it's no surprise to me that any system that's got his name associated with it and that applies his knowledge of sound is going to sound incredible. In 1993, I got a call from the head of EMI Records. They just signed the Rolling Stones, and they kind of wanted to put their own producer into the situation to keep an eye on things. So the Stones seemed to be receptive. I went to New York, and there I was just watching the Stones play their greatest hits with a new bass player. I'll never forget it. It was such a thrill. And then I'm sitting on a sofa, and they came over and sat down next to me, Mick on one side, Keith on the other side. And they both started talking to me at the same time. And from what I could make out, Keith was telling me why he didn't need a record producer to tell him how to play guitar. And Mick was talking about what maybe a producer could offer the situation. I was going back and forth like this and just trying to keep track of what they were all saying. Then they both stopped about 3 minutes in, and Keith Richards said, "You sure you want to be the meat in this sandwich?" For the last 27 years, I've been the meat in that sandwich. I've produced all of their records. We're working on a new one right now. When you're making a record, you're in the studio, it's kind of a vacuum. You don't really you know what it sounds like in this great room with all this great gear, but what's it going to sound like for the listener? What's it going to sound like at home. You really worry about that. It was such a pleasure to get into an Acura and listen to the ELS system and experience the music the way it was intended to be heard. I think it required a guy like Elliot who understands that that conundrum and possessed the desire to do something about it. I was driving around in 1966 with my mom running errands. She left me in the car with the keys so I could play with the radio, and I landed on Detroit's jazz station, WCHD. And I'd never heard any jazz before, but I heard this crazy saxophone coming out of the speakers. And I'm listening to it in a terrible mood, and I thought, wow, this saxophone, this is really speaking to me. This is capturing my mood. Later found out it was Joe Henderson, by the way, a song called Mode for Joe. And as the drummer started grooving, the music spoke to me and said, Don, you got to groove in the face of adversity. But it was also a great lesson in the power of music, and really, looking at it retrospectively, the power of music when you listen to it in your car. That's what I will say about the ELS system. It sounds like what you're hearing when you're making the music. And I think the fact that Acura embraced this kind of sound in a car when absolutely nobody else was doing that speaks volumes about them as a car company.